Hello and welcome. We are Yerushalmi Berachos Daf Zayin in the Oz V'Hadar print. And for those of you who are following the Vilna edition, as we've mentioned many times, it's a little bit of a different paginization. The pages have a lot more material on the Vilna one, but the way we're doing it now is just a slower pace. I want to give two basic ha'aras, but they're going to be more global for today. And then tomorrow I'm going to follow that through a little further because there's a very exciting passage in the Gemara that is actually quoted in Rashi and Shas and Bavli. So we'll start that conversation right now. So first thing is that the Gemara talks about the Kinor and the novel that would wake up David HaMelech. And it's very, very fascinating. Just a good Mara Makom. If you want to learn more about this Kinor that would wake him up, you could see the Shla in Masechus Berachos. He has a whole lengthy explanation of Sodas HaTorah that are really, really fascinating. And it would be interesting to kind of compare it to what the Kinor is, what the novel is, etc., and how we say those psukim and those words during davening as well in the morning. And there's a lot to talk about with David HaMelech when he was being Masaki in the world. Very fascinating. The Yerushalmi brings down similar machlokas that the Bavli has later after about how many mishmaros, how many watches the night has. And there's Rav Nassan and Rebbe, whether it was 3 versus 4. And again, just a comparative, it's just very fascinating to go through and see how the Gemara brings psukim in each of the Bavli and Yerushalmi, and how the answers are given. And different answers are given in the Bavli, different answers are given in the Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi, we mentioned many times, is Makal Noam. It's a lot more pleasant, so it's not as argumentative, so the back and forth doesn't go back often as lengthy. There's a famous story that's brought down in a couple of Sfarim, and I'm going to mention it even though it's Noah Dorish and Eno Noah Makayim. It's not something that I fulfill, but it's a point that I have in my heart that I think about and I wish I could fulfill. And that is that there's a man that came to Rechaim Kanievsky and said to him, I'm about to make a siyum on Shas Bavli, and I want to know, what should I do? I have an option of I could do Shas Bavli again, or I could do Yerushalmi again. So what would the Rav tell me to do? I could start Yerushalmi and do that. And everybody knows that Rechaim was very, very excited about Yerushalmi, so I guess he was also kind of expecting that. So Rav Chaim asked him, okay, let me ask you a question. He asked him a question about the last blot in Maseches Nida, which he had apparently just learned. And the guy thought for a little bit and gave an answer. And Chaim looked at him and said, are you sure? And then he started stuttering. He wasn't sure. It wasn't clear. So Chaim told him, go learn Bavli again. So the guy went home. He opened up his Gemara at the end of Bavli Nida, and he looked. And actually, the answer that he had stumbled through actually was the correct answer. So then he was confused because he knew Chaim knew that as well, but he actually gave him the right answer. So he went back to Chaim and he asked him, like, oh, that wasn't that the correct answer? Chaim said, yeah, you gave me the right answer, but you didn't have it with a clarity. And Chazal tell us that a person should learn Torah, and if somebody asks you a question, miyad. So if you're asking my opinion, I think since it wasn't clear, it wasn't mechudadim b'ficha, so therefore you should learn it again. And so, obviously, here we are. Many of us are learning Yerushalmi, and the Divrei Bavli are not mechudadim b'ficha. And Chazal even warn that going from Bavli to Yerushalmi is something that could cause a lot of confusion because it's such a different stylistic thing. So each person is speaking to their Rav and getting advice from the Rabbeim, people that they trust, in order to be able to make that decision about how they should be studying it, etc. But one of the most fascinating parts about learning it is comparing it. And I want to start that conversation a little bit right now. And that is that understanding Yerushalmi really helps us understand a lot of halachas. For example, there are some halachas that are only mentioned in the Yerushalmi, like Tainus Bechorim, which is the fast of the firstborn. I'm a firstborn, I know as well. The only makar for this is the Yerushalmi. There's also a whole genre of different Mamari Chazal that are allegedly in the Yerushalmi, which seem not to be in the Yerushalmi. At the back of the Yerushalmi, there's actually something called Hashmatas Yerushalmi, and it brings down something, lists and lists from each Masechta of things that people quoted the Talmud Eretz Yisrael or the Talmud Yerushalmi, and in the Yerushalmi in front of us, it's actually not here. And I'll hopefully talk a lot more about that, and there's some very fascinating ones. Probably some of the most famous ones were quoted by the Taj Bates, and he obviously had a different print, and there's a lot to say about that as well. But it's just fascinating to kind of notice that. But the comparative part of how the Gemara here deals with the 3 and 4 groups versus how the Bavli deals with it is very different, and it's very, very fascinating to look at it from that lens. Let's see if we have time for one more quick thing. Yeah, so basically, everyone says there's no Rishonim on Yerushalmi, and that's a big misnomer. It's 100% true and it's 100% not true. What do I mean? There's no Rishonim that wrote on the Yerushalmi directly that we have on the page that explain the Yerushalmi. There are people that were living very, very close to the time of the Rishonim. For example, I consider the Beis Yosef, and most people do, as the cutoff point of where that's the first of the Achronim, and he took all the Rishonim. So the Marash Srilio who lived in 1485 to 1558, was kind of in that time period. And he's actually probably the earliest commentator that we have directly on Yerushalmi. However, it's a big misnomer to say that Rishonim have not written about Yerushalmi, because they certainly have. Meaning that the Ramban, the Rashba, and many Rishonim, Tosas on the page, even Rashi, which we'll hopefully get to tomorrow, definitely saw some version, maybe some fragments of Yerushalmi, and definitely had discussions with them. Certainly, the Rashba, you see, quotes him very, very frequently. The Rush quotes him a lot, Lahalacha, the Rif, etc. So we'll get to the Rambam extensively. So the Rishonim certainly did use it, and there's a lot to talk about how he poskin. So I just wanted to kind of say that. Hopefully we'll go through some of these people and personalities and information about them. Thank you for joining me, and I wish you much hatzlacha.